Hey there, Maya here. What is it? It's a Wednesday night. I'm in upstate New York and it has been pouring rain here. And I'm trying a new, I'm wearing headphones because it's been pouring rain and I have a tin roof right outside my office window. So if you show up live and you cannot hear me, just let me know. Um, but I am here tonight, as promised, to talk to you about how you can get actual happiness and actual fulfillment happening in your life. And I've been having this conversation a lot recently, not just how to get happiness and fulfillment, and not also what happiness and fulfillment, what's the point, like what they'll do for you, but also, hey, Nady, but also permission for you to feel more happiness, satisfaction, fulfillment, inner peace, joy, whatever those emotions are that you are craving feeling and you're filled with yearning to feel. But you feel like, well, everybody else has it so much worse, or I need to be grateful for what I have. Now, gratitude is an awesome tool and it's an awesome feeling, right? So life feels better when we are feeling grateful. But I diverge from the mainstream message and the mainstream life coaching message here on gratitude because I think gratitude, sometimes we can paste it on, so it's not true. And real happiness, fulfillment, joy, satisfaction, true freedom all comes from listening to your inner voice. So I'm just giving away the main big point here. First off, listening to your inner voice, the voice of your soul. There's so many ways that has been expressed in religion and in spiritual circles and just in the culture. You know, people can talk about listening to their muse, right? Artists, poets, writers have talked about listening to their muse. That's an aspect of the soul. What is it? It's that still inner voice. I'm going to get them all mixed up. But if you can think, you think of what you think of when you think of listening to your inner voice, the voice of your soul, God talking to you. What would it be like if God could talk to you? I'm here to tell you it's totally possible. And starting to listen to the voice of your soul, to your inner voice, it really is the path to true happiness and fulfillment. And so there's a few things that pop up once you get on that path, right? Hey, Tess, thank you for all those pictures of your cat yesterday. That's exactly what I wanted to see. Okay, so the thing that I just gave away is, and you might have heard this before, but if this is not news to you, I don't want you to go like, oh yeah, I know that already, on to bigger and better things. I want you to go, I know that already. How deeply do I know this? It's that beginner's mind, right? It's like opening to a new layer of discovery with the true access point for you for happiness and fulfillment is listening to your inner voice. Now, first of all, we need permission to do that because we have all been trained to listen to what our parents think, right? I mean, I don't know how, if you have kids or if you are around kids or if you remember your childhood in any way, but there is this very subtle, well, sometimes not so subtle, but there is this attempt by grown-ups to manipulate little ones to behave a certain way so the grown-ups feel better. Now, if you're called to the soul path and finding true, real, honest to goodness, true fulfillment and happiness and joy and inner peace, then you're going to have to give that up. But this is what happens when you get on the road, on your path. All your triggers, your emotional baggage, all of that indoctrination is going to show up. So I once had a client, she and I were working privately together and she was making huge strides. Actually, I wanted to talk about her in another capacity tonight, but she had a major eating disorder. She was in her early 50s. She had been on a diet since she was 8 years old, and she had completely lost her capacity to not to listen to her inner voice because her inner voice was talking to her, but to honor and heed her inner voice. She absolutely said no because it was so risky. She was going to risk love and acceptance because her mother put her on a diet when she was 8 years old, and the entire family supported it. Like literally, this woman at age 8 was in this big Italian family, and she would have iceberg lettuce and they'd all be eating like spaghetti and meatballs, and she would get sent to her room during the dessert course. So by the time I met her in her early 50s, she had such a connection between love and food and massive eating disorder. And me too, by the way, right? That was one of my big issues and blocks on the path to happiness and fulfillment, was taking on this eating disorder that I had. But what she discovered was she could hear her inner voice, but she refused to listen to it because she had been trained from the time she was a little girl to get love and acceptance from her family, like we all were, but it was a little bit more extreme in her situation because love was removed if she gained weight, right? So it was like this huge risk for her to take on her eating disorder, to maybe even lose some weight. She didn't even, I didn't even see that was an issue for her, but in her mind, her words to describe herself was that she was fat, ugly, and disgusting. And I said to her at one point, I don't normally like sort of tell my clients how to feel about themselves, but I'm honestly looking at you and none of those adjectives apply. So she was taking on some really heavy, strong emotional baggage, right? So she heard her inner voice, but she refused to listen to it because love and acceptance and her whole identity was predicated on her family telling her who she was and giving her permission, right? So there was a period of a few months for her, and I remember she came to a live workshop that I did, and so I'm like trying to like show the women in the workshop what's possible if you start doing this kind of work, like what's available to you, all the beautiful healing and listening to your inner voice. And she speaks up and goes, honestly, I've been feeling a lot worse since we've been working together. Right? Oh my God. But the truth was, yeah, sometimes you're going to feel worse because now your awareness is keyed in. But also, when your soul knows you are now going to start listening to her, she's now free to speak more loudly, and she's going to start asking things of you. And then as you step out and start trying to listen to your inner voice, all of your shit is going to come up. All of it is. Now, sometimes it's really extreme. Sometimes it's less extreme. Sometimes it pops up in certain relationships that you have. But if you want real happiness and fulfillment, starting to listen to your inner voice is the number one thing that you want to do. So this client of mine knew she needed to do something about her eating disorder. So she hired me. At the time, I was working with women to help them find freedom from emotional eating, because that had been one of my big things. I was bulimic. I was a binge eater. Like I was literally a binge and purge person through my teens and 20s. And then I was just a binge person. So her inner voice, I met her actually. I was at an event and we were at the buffet table and I said, ooh, everything looks really good. It was like this beautiful, healthy, very nice buffet of foods. And she said, I'm afraid to even start, like, because then I won't stop. That's how we became, we started working together, how I became her coach. And her inner voice spoke up in that moment and spoke to me. It was interesting. The person who was running the event didn't get her as a client. I got her as a client because we connected, because her inner voice knew I would listen. And then the second she struck out on the path, and this is one of the things that I just want you to know could happen to you, and it's okay. It doesn't mean you're doing anything wrong. You start listening to your inner voice, and then all of your emotional baggage comes up, okay? So one of the things that you will have to take on when you take on your true happiness and fulfillment is some of your old emotional baggage that you've been carting around. I just want to take a look and see who's here. Hi, Rita, Kenny, Susan. Oh, how fun. Jacqueline is here. Oh, what a great group. Let me check my notes, actually. I threw together a quick little thing. Oh, yeah. I wrote down healing old trauma and emotional baggage is part of what you need to do on the path to real happiness and fulfillment. Because trauma, it's not too strong a word. I'm starting to sweat, and it's been raining. I just want to fix my hair a little bit. You guys can hear me okay with these earphones? I think you can. I forgot I was even using them. It's just been raining so much, I couldn't even hear myself. So So trauma is not too strong a word to describe the things that happened to you when you were young, when you were little. When you're little, your caretakers are the entire world. They create the meaning for the entire world around you, the meaning for who you are, for what life is. And so when you receive some kind of a shaming, or again, it could be very subtle, or it could be something very intense and dramatic, like my client whose parents or whose mother specifically put her on a diet when she was 8. And so she was eating salad while everybody else was eating big Italian grandmother cooking. Hi, Wayne. So do not, it is so easy to discount the things that have happened to us that have injured us emotionally. And it's so easy to say, well, I should be grateful. Other people have it so much easier. We're talking about you. And so your voyage to true fulfillment is listening to your inner voice, which means also hearing about all of the old trauma and emotional baggage that has happened to you and healing that, because you can heal it. Did you not hear me say I was bulimic for years? I'm not bulimic anymore. It's crazy. I have birthday cake. I don't know if you guys saw that post. My boyfriend baked me this beautiful almond birthday cake. And I was just remembering like, oh, I have cake downstairs. Forgot all about it. That never would have happened before. So healing trauma, we don't need to be afraid of it. You don't need to be afraid of it. And you don't need to try to like band-aid over it like, oh, well, you know that old thing that people say, and I just feel like I'm going to take some kind of a social hit for saying this, but you know, like, well, eat your vegetables because there are children starving in other countries. Now it's important that we know what's going on in the world and that we care about people in the world. I like that message that a parent is giving their child, but the two actually don't have anything to do with one another. You need to not discount what your inner voice is telling you and what your inner voice is telling you about your emotional trauma that is asking to be healed so that your soul can just speak freely, okay? So gratitude, you can practice it. I'm not opposed to that, but you want to not paste it on like a cover. Like, I don't know if this is a good example of what they call, what is it? Is it like spiritual bypass or something? Like, oh, I'm fine, it's all good. Watch out for that. When you start saying stuff like that, you are not listening to your true inner voice unless it's like this welling up, this bubbling up of like, ooh, I'm so grateful. That's been happening to me a lot more recently. And I've been watching it going, okay, because here's the deal. Your inner voice, your soul will tell you, I don't like this. This is not it. And so if we're going to really believe, I really believe that God speaks to us through our soul desires. Now that could be, you might say that your higher self speaks to you through your soul desires, or the universe, or your soul. Use whatever words really fit you best. But I believe that there is a spiritual message coming through to each of us through our likes and dislikes, through our desires, not our ego, okay? And this is where it gets a little tricky. So I know that I have a private group here on Facebook called the Rule Breakers Freedom Forum, and it's a free group. There's a member in there who just had this huge aha overnight where she was like, oh, she'd been saying all along, well, Maya, I've taken all of this emotional stuff on before, all my trauma. I've been talking about it, writing about it, in therapy about it for years. Like, I can't keep doing that. And last night, because I kept saying, go deeper, there's more there. There's a message for you that's not just bad news. And last night, she had this big aha moment of, oh, I've been coming at it mentally. I've been like looking at that injured child and like mentally sort of separating myself. But to really have the catharsis, she needed to get to connection with feeling, right? So that she could actually release the old emotional baggage and the trauma that she had been experiencing. That just happened to a member of my private group. And that's huge, right? So that's the distinction. I was saying to her, like, it's so hard to articulate it. And she said it so perfectly in her post this morning, but the difference between like your mind and your emotions, or your soul and your ego, you have to experiment with it, and you'll go, oh, I'm not looking just for external praise here. I'm feeling like this soul welling up of, I did good, I did a good job. Or so listening to your inner voice, you begin to have to differentiate and learn how to differentiate between your mind and your ego identification and your emotional and your soul expression and identification. Hey, Karen. Hi, Celine. CJ. Guys, if you have any, if you want to comment, if you want to ask me any specific questions, feel free to do so. Let me just look back at my notes. Oh, there was one more thing I want to say. Okay, so we're saying that the path to happiness and fulfillment is learning how to listen to your inner voice and then also having the courage to follow through. I had a client recently who kept feeling like she wanted to leave her marriage. Now, I just want to say this for the record. Many of my clients stay in their marriages and deepen their romantic connection and their sexual connection. Some of my clients leave relationships. There is no template for how you're meant to live out your soul expression, okay? So that's why you need to start listening to your inner voice. So this one client felt like she might need to leave her marriage. When she started to talk about that to me in private sessions, guys, is the internet connection okay? I just saw a flash. Let me know if there's anything. Hi, Amy. If there's anything about the sound or the internet or the rain pouring down, just let me know. So this client of mine started working with me privately and admitted in the sanctity of our private sessions that she was considering leaving her husband. Now, this was not something she wanted to talk about publicly. It wasn't on the table really in her life. And then as soon as she made that confession to me and we started to take it seriously, she started to have all of her old like social programming, mental programming, emotional baggage come up. And one of the pieces was she felt like she was going to be a bad mother if she let her kids be around a divorce. So for example, that can be one of your beliefs. You can have some emotional baggage that comes up when you start to step out, okay? Do not let that stop you. That's why we have to surround ourselves with people who will be willing to support us when we start to experiment and take the right risks, because you have old emotional baggage and trauma that you have to clear out, right? That can get messy, it can get ugly, it can be uncomfortable, but you have to clear it out in order to really hear the voice of your soul. You have to start listening to the voice of your soul or your inner voice, which takes a lot of practice and a lot of nerve. And most people are like, well, what does your mother have to say about that? Oh, well, we don't, you know what I mean? It's like, just think of the worst voice in your head, and that is what is going to come up when you start stepping out. We also have all of this old programming, like, again, like those rules about our fit. Well, I mean, a girl, you're a girl, so, or, well, you're over 45, or whatever the fuck it is, right? Okay? And then you have to start taking the right risks. How do you know what the right risks are? At first, you don't. That's what's so crazy. At first, you don't actually know what the right risks are. You'll get some like inner feeling of, ooh, I want to move in this direction. And then all of your stuff is going to come in and you're going to have to practice. One of the things that we worked on in one of my group programs last spring was how to tell the difference between fear, which just is the stuff that comes up to stop us. It's like, old reptilian brain. And what's the difference between just fear and an intuitive no? When your system is like, no, this is an intuitive no. And it can be very subtle. So again, you need to be around people and you need to be in a situation where people are encouraging you to experiment and to start to play, all right? So I know for me, I hired my first coach about 9 years ago. And I remember she at one point was like, you need to start living from this new mantra and I'm gonna give it to you. She said, you need to write it down. I was like, okay. So innocent, wasn't I? I didn't know how scary it was going to be or how amazing my life was going to become when I followed this. And some of the people who have worked with me before have heard me talk about this. She said, I want you to start saying to yourself, I trust my desires to lead me to my best life. I don't know how you feel when I say that. How do you feel when I say that to you? Trust your desires to lead you to your best life. Just check in with yourself, because I'm having this really strong reaction, and this is like 7 years old, this mantra. Well, I'm going to say it one more time. Trust your desires to lead you to your best life. Say it maybe in the first person. I trust my desires to lead me to my best life. I get this electric feeling, because how powerful is that? It's giving you permission to tune into your inner voice, hear what your soul desires are, and then act on them and follow them and discover your best or your fullest or your rightest, your most right life. And it'll look like this. I don't know if you can see me, zigzag. So you're gonna be like, oh, I know what it is. It's this job. Excellent. Oh, I'm so happy. My soul spoke. And it's this job, and I'm gonna go for this job or this man or whatever it is, right? And then you burn your bridges and you move into the new job and then they fire you, right? That can be what happens. But from that new place, you're like now in a new place. Now your soul can be like, okay, we broke free from the old constraints. Now we're in the new place, okay? So you need to surround yourself with people who aren't going to be like, well, I told you, you shouldn't. I mean, you should just be grateful you have a job. I mean, your job is actually pretty good. I don't know where this voice is coming from tonight. I don't know what the voice is in your head. Hey, Jason. But what's the voice in your head that, like, tonight, apparently this voice is showing up for me like, well, oh, this is part of the programming you might have. In our culture, we have this really big rule that people do not change. Or like, oh, depression just runs in my family. Oh, well, you know, like, right? It could be anything that is trying to hold you back. So again, just to recap here, to find real, true, deep happiness and fulfillment. I am not talking superficial. Okay, you know what? Let me tell you this. They have done some scientific studies around what happiness is made up of. 10% of happiness is your life situation. So like it's hot and really rainy over here, and I think my internet is going in and out. Oh, Jason says, hi, little lady. I like that. So it's like a little uncomfortable, like, you know what I mean? Like just, right? That's my life situation. So I don't have the AC on. I have the fan on. Pardon me while I glisten here on this video. I thought I had the AC on. Our life circumstance is like how much money we make, who we're married to, where we live, what we do for a living. Those are important things. And you're gonna walk over here with me while I turn on the AC. Look at me, I'm gonna be adjusting my life circumstance because happiness is partly made up of your life circumstance. But anybody want to take a guess? Anybody want to take a guess as to what percentage of your life situation impacts your happiness? Just think about it. Because I know, I'm a life coach. I've stopped really just calling myself a life coach. I call myself a personal liberation coach too, because it's not just about your life. We're not just trying to move objects around in your life. Like, oh, let me try a new person. Oh, let me try a new job. If you want to know if moving apartments randomly or changing boyfriends or jobs randomly works, I can tell you from personal experience that it doesn't. Hi, Jennifer. Hey, Meg. So where we are right now, guys, is we're looking at what happiness is made up of. So we all believe really that our social circumstances, our money, our love life, that is what our happiness is made up of. So we're always trying to shift things around. And so I just asked everybody what percent you think your life circumstances are made up of. Wait, I just did not phrase that right. What percentage your life circumstances impact your happiness? All right, are you ready for this? 10%. Your life situation impacts your happiness by 10%. That's like nothing. That's like nothing. No wonder I kept changing jobs and boyfriends and nothing happened. I'd have a great moment like, all right, everything's in place. And then within 3 to 6 months, I'd be bored, unfulfilled, miserable, binge eating, bulimic again. I don't know what your pattern is, but okay. So we can't just keep randomly moving things in our life around. We have to be taking the right risks, right? So that's why you have to listen to your inner voice, clear out all of the old emotional baggage, surround yourself with people who are going to support you in experimenting with taking the right risks. And also who will support you when everything falls apart, because like I said a minute ago, often when you start to take the risk of listening to your soul desires and you step out, things might fall apart a little bit. That happened to me. I finally moved out of New York City 6 years ago this week, actually. Ooh, it's an anniversary week. I'd forgotten. And I was following the mantra that my coach then had given me, which was, I trust my desires to lead me to my best life. And I moved to the Hudson Valley here in New York. I moved to New Paltz, loved the town of New Paltz. I was madly in love with a man there. Oh, he had a motorcycle, a house in the country, a hot tub, a big trampoline, just like everything I desired. And I moved to New Paltz and he totally dumped me. But what was really interesting, and I can see it in retrospect, I could even see it then because I was so much happier on this like deep level living in New Paltz than I had been in like Brooklyn, Washington Heights, Jersey City. that my soul called me to move to New Paltz. I thought it was mainly to be with this man, and then the relationship fell apart. But I was now in a new place. So now I live in the country. Okay, so your happiness is 10% made up of your life circumstances. It is 40% made up of your mindset and what you believe about life. I didn't make this stuff up, guys. Don't get mad at me. But this is where it gets really interesting. That mantra that I just shared with you that my then coach gave me, I trust my desires to lead me to my best life, that is so fucking radical. I mean, maybe you had a family or you grew up in a situation where they said, listen to your inner voice. You know, God speaks to you through your desires. You can trust your desires. They'll lead you to your best, your right life. Most of us did not. Okay, so we have to learn it. So we've got all these other beliefs like life is something that just happens to you. You know, people can't change. I need to be grateful for this job because at least I have a job. What is it for you? All of that mindset stuff and all of that emotional baggage and all of the things that we believe about life make up 40% of your happiness. So you need to get in there and straighten that shit out, right? And in fact, for me, coming to do this video today, I don't know why I slept really badly last night. I slept so badly. And I was like, oh, I want to do a Facebook Live. I had this idea and then maybe I'll skip it. And my boyfriend was like, I'm going to go to the gym. When I get back, you will have showered, you will have drunk more coffee, you will have meditated, and you will be ready to do a Facebook Live. And your attitude will be different. He's a former military guy. I like it when he talks to me like that because it straightened me out. Now, I don't know what kind of accountability works for you, but you need to find the people who love you enough to speak truth into your life and help you get your shit together. All of that mindset stuff, okay? Because often we're stuck because we just don't have the tools. I mean, we just don't have the tools, right? So, okay, so yes, as a coach, I help people straighten stuff out in their life, right? Like money and their relationships, where they live, what they do for a living. Absolutely. But then the bigger portion is mindset and all that stuff you believe, because you have a spiritual belief system, even if you don't know what it is. My belief system, and I had no clue 10 years ago. That's why I kept like changing boyfriends and jobs. And I'm like, why am I not fulfilled? Why am I not happy? Because I kept waiting for something to happen in my life. I kept waiting for my real life to start because I did not know it at the time. But my family has this belief that life is something that just happens to you. And either you're lucky or you're not, but there's nothing you can do about it. That is such a disempowering belief. So you need to have someone in your life who will help you get inside your belief system and create a spiritual and life belief system that supports you. What's the final 50% of your happiness made up of? Your genetics, your DNA. Does depression run in your family? Does cancer run in your family? Now, okay, I feel like all the walls are crumbling in, right? Because what do we believe in our culture? I said this earlier. We believe that people cannot change. And that's a big rule that we have in our culture that, well, it just runs in your family. It's in your DNA. But science is now, this stuff is crazy, guys. If you're not familiar with epigenetics, get familiar because it shows that if you have a trauma, let's say your grandparents experienced a trauma like the Great Depression, you might want to look at your money situation, thinking about where your grandparents or your great-grandparents were and what they were experiencing around money. Now, they might have had a lot of money. I know in my past in Eastern Europe, my relatives had a lot of money. They had a very successful newspaper business. And then all these wars happened. It was not safe to have a lot of money and be successful. You were a target. So I always have this feeling of like, hide it, don't show it, don't have it, right? Don't have the money, don't have the success. That was one of the big programmings in my DNA. But there's now something called the science of belief, and there are ways to shift your DNA back. So if your grandparents experienced a trauma like the Holocaust is a big obvious one, or the Depression, or maybe just something, I had a boyfriend, his family went bankrupt when he was a little boy. So it wasn't even many generations removed, but he was like, he said he had a bunker mentality. He was like, I don't want a bigger apartment. I want a rent stabilized apartment. I want to stay here. I don't want to move. Just want to stay safe and small and low to the ground. So if depression or bankruptcy or anxiety can be created genetically by your forebears in your DNA, you also can heal it. Now, again, that's a place where you just need the tool. So if you want to get yourself real happiness and fulfillment, What do you need to start doing? Listening to your inner voice, healing all of the old emotional stuff. Yeah, shifting some stuff around in your life, right? But I think sometimes that's the next step. Sometimes when I start working with a client, I'm like, don't make any changes. Let's just really get you tuned into your inner voice, really clearly listening to the voice of your soul, seeing all of your old shit that comes up, healing that, and you start stepping out and experimenting a little bit and seeing where it leads you while healing your mindset and clearing out all of that gunk in your DNA, in your very genetics. And one of the last sort of bonus things I want to throw out there, and this is along the lines of following your soul desires, but you might be getting called to something like creative, right? Maybe you don't have a big trauma going on right now. Maybe you've done all that work and you're being called into something bigger. You can feel it. It's just like, you don't know what it is, but maybe you just feel like you're being pulled into something creative. Creativity, whatever it is, creativity, whether it's in your relationships or with a new self-expression mode in terms of like writing, for example, or I have a new radio show and it is just fulfilling me. Even on a tired day like today, I'm like, I'm good because I've got this radio show that I'm writing, that I'm planning, that I'm thinking about. Oh, there was one more thing I wanted to say. I just remembered. This is a big mindset thing, okay? So I'm going to give this to you guys as just like sort of a bonus mindset thing. When you focus on the problem, it's like you obfuscate the solution. So let's just picture you're walking down the road, right? You're on your path, and then this big cloud bank of fog comes in. You're just trying to grapple your way through the fog. You can't even see the road on the other side. That's what it's like when you have whatever it is. If you're just like, I have no money, or no one will ever love me, no one will ever love me. Or my client who I mentioned earlier, who had that eating disorder from the time she was 8 until she started working with me at 54. We were working on a bunch of things, including the eating disorder. And one day in a session, she said something that caused me to ask, like, well, how are you doing with food these days? And she said, oh, I'm not really binge eating anymore. Like if I feel like I need to crunch on something, I'll just eat a salad. And I sat there and I stared at her. I said, when were you going to tell me? When were you like, you hired me as your emotional eating freedom coach, and now you've healed like a 45-year-long major eating disorder, and you're not even going to announce it as a win? What are you thinking? And she just started laughing because she realized, next problem, on to the next problem, because we're so intent on our problems. So when I start working with clients, the number one thing you have to do when you get on the phone with me is brag. It can be a tiny win. People hate doing it at first. I can tell when somebody's been with me a while because they're like, hey, Maya, oh my God, I had so many cool things happen. I actually got my nails done yesterday, right? Sometimes the wins that we like discount and discard are huge in terms of how to start taking care of yourself so that your soul can start to speak to you. I had a client whose 6-month goal, one of her 6-month goals was to get her hair done. Do you know what kind of craziness she had to go through to give herself permission to get her hair done, right? So I don't know where you are. So the wins can be what might look tiny, you might judge as tiny, but they're huge. So when people start working with me, they're like, I just have problems. I want to talk about my problems. But that's your reptile brain. We are programmed to think about our problems. I can still feel it. It's like a little bit of heavy lifting. Like when my boyfriend gave me that talking to today, he's like, you will adjust your attitude. If you need to have 12 cups of coffee to do it, right? But it's like, okay, how do you take a stand against the way the world is? Because the world, look at the news. Now, I'm not saying there isn't bad news out there, obviously, right? But when we allow ourselves to be looped into that obsession with only the bad news, it reinforces our reptile brain thinking. It reinforces all of our historical DNA, our grandparents from the Depression or losing the farm or whatever that trauma was that we're carrying with us. Instead of clearing it out, it compounds it, it impacts it, right? All of our mindsets that like there's scarcity, that's our survival brain. But if we're going to start shifting the world, we have to start focusing on our happiness and our fulfillment and our self-expression. And it's radical because people will be like, who do you think you are? But it's radical because it's the only way to shift out of that, the way our whole world is running, which is problem focused, negative, not oriented toward creative solutions at all. So if you want more real fulfillment, like the deep, bone deep fulfillment, you got to go for the creative solutions. I don't know. I just talked a whole bunch. Guys, does anybody want to say anything? I see, what does Rita say? My desires in the moment, I'm not as aware at this time of future desires. You know, sometimes, Rita, though, it's like just being in the moment. I mean, that's another game to play, right? That's a more advanced level. Man, I really am glistening over here, guys. To just be with yourself, to just be like in your ground of being. And in fact, coming from that place, you can start to hear a desire. I love this Martha Beck book called The Joy Diet. It's not about food, it's about joy. And the first thing she has you do is sit and do nothing for 15 minutes a day. And then the next step, after you've done that for like a solid week, the next step is to see what desire surfaces. I don't know if she phrases it that way, right? But so ground of being. And if you find yourself that you're just shifting things around in your life, like sometimes like me turning on the air conditioner, that's a life upgrade, right? But sometimes we just start moving objects around in our life and we're like, why am I not happier? Because it's not deep enough. It's not deep enough. So if you're feeling called for real happiness and fulfillment, you might need to get ready to go deep and really take it all on. But that is what, I mean, can you imagine a world where we were oriented toward creative problem solving? Oh my God. Just even imagining it for you. We don't even have to look at the whole big world. Just for you. What would be possible in your life right now, today, like this year, if you started to not just randomly shift things around, but really listen to the voice of your soul, clear out and heal your emotional traumas, and start taking the right risks and be surrounded by people who support and like celebrate you doing that. Can you imagine if you were able to shift from just problem solving to like creative solution creation? Creative solution creation. I doubled up there, but you know, like think about that. What would be possible for you? Okay, gang, I got it all off my chest. I hope that there was something in here for you, and I will see you soon on Facebook.